You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is June 29th, 2025, and this is episode 320 of Lighthearted. Today we'll hear part 2 of my 2-part interview with Lorna Pierce and Gloria Coder, daughters of Seamond Ponsart Roberts. Seamond was the daughter of the longtime Massachusetts lighthouse keeper Octave Ponsart, and she was the author of the book Everyday Heroes, The True Story of a Lighthouse Family. I have visited Cuttyhunk Island twice. The first time was in the summer of 2001. My wife and I took the ferry from New Bedford, and we met up with Seamond and her daughter Gloria. We traveled with a small group out to the western end of the island where the lighthouse was until it was demolished in 1946. Seamond spent a few years of her early childhood there when her father was the keeper. Also, Seamond's mother's family, the Cornells, was from Cuttyhunk. That visit was a special day for everyone. We explored the ruins of the old keeper's house. The oil house was still standing without a roof. A ring on the ground marked the location of the old lighthouse. They tore down the tower in 1946 because they thought erosion was about to make it topple into the ocean, but as of 2001, the ring still hadn't gone over the edge. I remember that day, Seamond threw a beautiful wreath into the water in memory of her parents. The wind made it really difficult to throw the wreath the way she wanted, but of course it was the thought that counted. I have a lot of favorite visits to lighthouses in the 40 years I've been doing this stuff. That visit to Cuttyhunk that day was one of my favorite lighthouse days, even though we didn't see an actual lighthouse. I'll talk about my second ever visit to Cuttyhunk shortly, but first, let's listen to part 2 of my interview with Gloria Coder and Lorna Pierce. So you mentioned her Navy husband. She actually had 4 Navy husbands. Is that correct?
That is correct.
4 husbands. They're all in the Navy, right?
Yep.
What was it about Navy guys?
They were just charming, I guess. Maybe it's the uniform.
She couldn't find a Coast Guard guy. I don't know.
Well, the Navy and Coast Guard are not that different, really. So it kind of makes.
Don't tell a Coast.
Don't tell a Coastie or a Navy guy that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I know there's a little kind of rivalry there.
Yeah.
So let's get back to was it 2001, Gloria, that you made a trip to Cuttyhunk, or was it 2000 or 2001? It was one or the other.
Yes, it was around that time. I'm thinking.
Yeah. And so my wife Charlotte and I went out there. It's the first time I had ever been on the island, and a group of us actually made it out to the former site of the Cuttyhunk Lighthouse at the far western tip of the island, which is the far western tip of the Elizabeth Islands. That was a pretty memorable day. And I actually, if you remember, took pictures of you and your mom standing in the ruins of the foundation of the keeper's house.
Yes, I remember that.
Lived. Yeah, so that was extremely memorable. How did you feel about it that day?
As I sat down there with Mom, she just, she told me, she goes, wow, this is really emotional. And she told me what was around her. And she explained how the house, all the rooms, and that where we were sitting was down where the cisterns were, where they collected their rainwater. And it just gave her that connection back to the island. I mean, it was a very emotional time for her, but it made me feel more connected to at that time, that I was experiencing it firsthand with Mom, and just really being able to now vividly see more of what she had been telling us the whole time. So, yeah. I mean, Mom was so happy to go back there and to see it, even though it's in ruins. She knew it would be in ruins, but what was there, it just gave her that reconnection and that rejuvenation of those memories.
It was a big deal for me being there that day. I felt very privileged to have been invited to be part of that. And to be, I was friends with your mom, so that made it special. But to be at that place with the daughter of the last keeper of Cuttyhunk Lighthouse, it just, it all meant a lot to me. Great day.
It was a great day.
So back to hurricanes. Your mom lived through a bunch of hurricanes and other bad storms in her life at the lighthouses and elsewhere. And then she and her husband, David, were, as I think you mentioned a little bit before, were in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit.
Yes.
And one of you want to say what happened at that point? What
Well,
happened?
Katrina was tough for them. They lived in a small house on the West Bank of New Orleans, and they had a trans van, and they did everything. They knew they had to get out. It was bad. I mean, anybody that thinks that storm was not bad, 80% of the population in New Orleans evacuated, and that's pretty profound. I mean, the 20% that stayed there honestly had no way of getting out. They were either too poor or had no means to get out. Mm-hmm. So Mom and David, they loaded up the trans van. They had a dog that they tried to get into the van. Tuffy would not get in the van, so they did the best they could for him. And I think they locked him in a shed, and a neighbor that was staying said, "We'll check on the dog." So they left the city. They started driving west to Lafayette. Katrina came through, and nobody could get back into the city because the city was locked down. Mm-hmm. But while they were in Lafayette, another storm came through, another hurricane on the back of that one came through, and they had to leave Lafayette and go north to Pineville. And it was like they were just being chased by storms.
Yeah.
And so they ended up in Alexandria, Louisiana, and people were very kind to them in Lafayette while they were there. And then they got up there to Pineville and managed to find a place that would rent to them because they couldn't go home. Mm-hmm. There was no going home. My brother, Norman, had evacuated as well, and he had no way of going home. So he ended up coming to stay with me and my other half. And he eventually was able to get into New Orleans to try and see what was left of Mom and David's house. And this big tree had completely fallen through the back part of the house. By that time, because National Guard was there, the police were there, nobody was being allowed in except for short periods of time. Everything that they owned was destroyed or ruined. Mm-hmm. So he tried to salvage what he could because he knew Mom hung on to a lot of things. She was a collector, and I think that's from growing up very poor. So even little things, emergency supplies were a big deal to her. Like candles and, sewing kits and stuff like that, because that was, I guess, prime stuff when you lived on a lighthouse. There was just so much of their lives that was in that little tiny house, and they lost so much: pictures, memories, all that. But he was able to get some of that and bring up to Mom up in Pineville. And they found a trailer park up there that gave them a place to rent. And then Gloria helped them get into the house where, became Mom's last home. And, so those people really took them in. And that was in, it was just such a miracle for the two of them, especially being older people.
People were just wonderful. People came out of the woodwork to help everybody. And that's what she saw, that kindness from everybody. Even though it was a terrible event, people wanted to help, and they did. And that made her just such a big impression and just gave her that vitality for life again, because they've been just, kind of squashed on their energy and stuff. So,
yeah. I remember her sending me emails during that time, and a lot of it, she was, there were a lot of complaints I know about insurance and FEMA and all that kind of thing. They went through a lot, but the kindness of people went a long way to making up for all that, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. When they made I was going to say, her and I stood in the FEMA line for over the whole day, and there was some church that came by because FEMA told us, if you get out of line, you're going to lose your place. And there was no place for a lot of the older people to sit. And this one church came by with grocery carts full of ready-to-eat foods that we could just have snacks, and they had bottled water because it was hot. And I mean, that was just such a blessing. And as you left the FEMA line, they were giving out tuna fish and mayonnaise and loaves of bread so that you could have at least something to eat. And I'll just always remember that, because that FEMA line, people just were devastated. And, it took so much to go through that. And unfortunately, a lot of people that were on the receiving end, or the FEMA people that were receiving us, they were not so kind. But those people in the line, they were all in the same situation. And people coming to just, have snacks and water for everybody in that line, they knew it was going to be a difficult time. And it's like, who thought about doing that? It was like, it was a very nice thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the system was just overloaded by all that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, 80% of the people that lived in New Orleans evacuated. And then the ones that were left behind had to deal with that horrific 10 days when nobody came in to help. Nobody came in. And so,
people on rooftops holding up signs and all that stuff.
And it's funny. I've been back to New Orleans quite a bit since then. There are still parts of New Orleans that you go through and you'll see the big X's on the doors. Not everything's they're still recovering, and it's been almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So it's just awful.
Yeah. I was in New Orleans 3 times prior to Katrina. I haven't been there since. I'd like to go again, but I know it's a changed place at this point.
Yeah, I'm going on the 23rd. I'm going to go spend 8 days there. So
good.
Looking forward to that.
I'm sure it's still a fun place.
Absolutely it is.
Yeah. So on another subject, your mom loved writing letters. Her mother loved writing letters before her, and her mom, Emma, wrote letters to the Maine Coast Fisherman newspaper, reports on what was going on at the lighthouse. Various keepers and wives would write those letters, so that was a lot of fun. What do you remember about your mom's prodigious letter writing?
Well, I'm going to let Gloria take this one.
Well, you know what? First of all, Mom had beautiful handwriting, and she was always, coaching us on how to write, nicer and neater, and told us about how penmanship was so important. I just remember that as a child. But she was very good about, I'd love to say that she encouraged us, but many times she just made us write letters, when they were appropriate and stuff, like for thank yous or things like that. And she taught us that etiquette about writing letters. But she has always written letters, and especially when she needed to advocate for something. If something was not good, at least in her vision or somebody's else, she would not miss the chance to write to somebody about it. And as I've been going through things, I found copies of the letters that she had written. Some of them were typewritten, and it's the carbon copy, back when she used carbon paper. And, there's everything from writing a letter about how a picture in a women's magazine, it was really showing too much skin, and that women were not interested in seeing that in their magazines, and how she was going to write to Billy Graham about this and everybody. And so, we found that. We found other letters that, I'm trying to think, Lorna, what were some of the other letters that?
Oh, there was the newspaper article when she wrote to the newspaper in New Orleans about the parking meter maids.
Oh, yes. And that one got published in the newspaper.
Yep, and even got mentioned on the radio because she was outraged that the city had come in and put in parking meters after everybody had parked that morning. And then the meter maids came along afterwards and gave everybody tickets. And she went out at lunch and saw this gentleman dressed in a suit and tie beating his head on the roof of his car. And she said that just wasn't right. Mom liked to write to people about when she perceived that an injustice had been done. Mm-hmm. So she was real good about expressing her opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some handwritten letters from her that I cherish.
Yeah. And, many of the letters, as she wrote to me, since I've been the daughter that has been away from her physically longer, as far as, distance and stuff, she's written me more letters probably than she's written Lorna. And in so many of those letters, she says, "Oh, I want to tell you about this." And some of it is stories that she remembered growing up. It's family history. And she goes, "I want you to know about this." So, she would write it. So I've kept those letters. Anything that was like a family history story, I've written those, or not written them, I've read them. And, she told me about the story when her dad's father was born here in Massachusetts, and how, it's quite a funny little story, but she tells a story about how her grandfather, Desiree, he was born here in the United States, and it was the great-grandfather who had been born in Belgium. Well, when the mom was in labor, she ended up having the baby at home because that's what they did. Well, they sent the men away. And so the men went down to the bar to get a drink. Well, he came home and they just weren't as rough, I guess, with the babies when they came out. And so the baby came out, it wasn't crying. And this is for Desiree. And they kind of wrapped the baby up and put the baby over to the side. Well, the grandfather or his father came in and says, "Oh, do we have a baby and everything?" And he was just so excited. And he sees the little baby wrapped up over the side. And the women are having a fit going, "Don't touch the baby," And he starts kind of going, "Oh," to this with his buddy. And the baby starts crying. And so it was kind of, they used to joke around and say it was a Belgium resuscitation because, and so, but that's how Desiree was born, and he was brought back to life because, his father and his friend, they were just so drunk, they didn't even know what was going on. But, she made sure to tell me these little stories about them growing up and how, her grandmother, they all lived like in the same house. They had one of those houses in New Bedford that it was like each family owned like part of the house, different floors. And so they had several generations living, but each floor belonged to a different person. And so she would do that. But also, like Lorna said, anytime something was just not right, she was willing to speak up, stand up and either write about it or say something about it. And she did that for Lorna and I at our schools. If something was not right, she went down there and she's like, "You better make this right." And so anything like that, but she loved writing letters. And I remember as a child, I mean, she went through stamps. We went to the post office a lot and she mailed a lot of letters. And that was how she really kept in touch. From the time we were little, I just remember thinking, Mom has a lot more friends than Dad, because she would get all this mail and she would mail away so many things.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that came from when she was a kid. She had pen pals because that's what they did back in the 40s. You would have pen pals. And so from that, Mom made friends through pen pals and then acquaintances. She got into this thing with soldiers and service members that were serving over in Iraq and Iran, of writing letters to them. I mean, she had a young lady that read the book, and the girl is, I guess, maybe 9 or 10 years old, lives up in Canada or Montana or something like that. And here she is, this old lady corresponding with this little girl. And she would send her like books about horses because the young lady was involved, loved horses and things like that. Or and Facebook, oh my God, Facebook opened up the world.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many people Mom had friends with. I have never met these people, but when she passed, I got all these, contacts and like that. So, Mom may have lived kind of a secluded life, but she just had such a gathering of people that she knew. So they may never have met her, but they got a letter from her, or they got an email from her, or something like that. So.
No, you're right. Facebook was a great thing for her. And I know how people I know, got to correspond with her and just enjoyed it so much. And, I actually set up that Facebook page with the name of the book, Everyday Heroes, True Story of a Lighthouse Family. And she just ran with it.
Yeah.
Which was
That's generally the way she did it. I mean, whether it was a Facebook page or baseball cards or stamps or whatever, when Mom got interested in something, she stayed interested.
Yeah.
So, you actually created quite the thing there.
It's still, as for the best of my knowledge, that page is still up. I mean, it can still be accessed. One of us should somehow preserve everything that's on there. I'm not sure the best way to do that. There must be a way that's not too difficult, but
there is.
It should be preserved. Yeah. Besides, so I got letters from her, but another thing she would send, I'm sure she did this with a lot of people. She would mail me clippings from newspapers and stuff, usually to do with lighthouses or things she thought I might be interested in. And that happened for years. Actually, I think the last one was weeks before she passed. I got one of those. It made me feel, and I'm sure other people who got stuff like that just feel kind of special. Oh, she's taken the time to save something like that and send it to me. That was nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Mom knew that I'm kind of a, I don't know, amateur chef. kind of thing. And so she started sending me cookbooks and then clippings about cookbooks.
Mm-hmm.
And where she shared family history with Gloria, it was like she shared hobbies with me.
Yeah.
And so, I would get a package and there'd be an envelope this thick. And my other half and I would sit there and say, yep, another package from Mom. So it would be interesting to see what articles were contained in that particular envelope. So, yeah.
I got some of those thick envelopes, not as many, I'm sure, but it was always, it's like Christmas when I'd open them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure the post office there in Pineville was just like, they just wait for her to show up because it was boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff. So,
wow. Yeah. So speaking of all the letters she would write to me and also emails we exchanged, let's see, I'm trying to remember, it's got to be 20 years. It was more than 20 years ago, obviously, maybe 25. We first became acquainted kind of long distance. Let me tell you how I first became acquainted with your mom. What happened was somehow I found I got her contact information. I thought this is somebody I'd like to talk to about her childhood at the Lighthouses. She wrote back to me and said, "Are you the guy who borrowed a photo from me, a Flying Santa photo a few years ago and never gave it back to me?" And no, it wasn't me. For some reason, she confused me with somebody else. And I had to convince her it wasn't me, and then she couldn't have been nicer. I mean, it wasn't. I wasn't the one who did
it
that.
wasn't you, Jeremy. Good thing it wasn't you.
Yeah, no, that would have been it. It would have been the end of it. But I was able to convince her. But so anyway, so then she started writing me these emails and physical letters, and telling stories of her childhood at the lighthouses, and they weren't in chronological order. It was just whatever she thought of on that day. She would send me this story. So after like 12 years of getting those stories, I said, we got to put this in a book, and she agreed. So that's how the book came about. Everyday Heroes: True Story of a Lighthouse Family. It's your mother's book. They're her stories. It's her language. What I did was I assembled it in a chronological way that I thought made logical sense.
You did a good job.
Well, thank you. I also, here in the little secret, and because I had to make it flow in sort of a narrative way, I wrote little connective things in her voice, what I thought, it was her voice to kind of connect things. So hopefully it's seamless. I think it is, but it's 99.
I have the original manuscript at home.
Okay. We went through different versions of it, but it was, again, 99% her stories and everything. So I just felt really, really privileged to be involved with all that. It was, I've written something like 24 books, depending on how you count them. I think I'm proudest of that book. I'm just so happy we're able to do that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for doing that for her, too.
Oh, you're very welcome. What do you think it meant to her to get her stories in a book?
Oh, my God. That's like, I don't think, other than us kids, I don't think she's ever been prouder of anything that she's ever done than she was of having that book. And, it's not just that the book was written and it was about her. It was like she used it as a method to bring other people into the Lighthouse world. She would buy copies of her own book.
Yeah.
Send them off to people.
Yeah, through me.
Yeah. And it was just, I think it was the thing that she was the proudest of having, her story put into writing. Mom loved books. She loved reading. And I don't think without your help that would have ever happened. So, we're really grateful to you for helping that happen for her. I think that just made everything complete for her.
Well, thank you. I was really happy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like Lorna said, it meant the world to Mom getting that there. Mom never got to go off and go to college. Mom was very just highly self-educated. She was one that I would read, 8 to 10 books every 2 to 3 weeks on about anything she could, which had continued from her just asking everybody to bring me what they have to read. And, when her first story got published in Cape Cod Life magazine, about Cuttyhunk and the tree being poached off their land and everything, that was just like, wow, I've actually got something published. And so that was an accomplishment. And then I remember her telling me, I've been writing this guy for all these years, and he's been collecting my letters, and he's going to help me get this book together. And it's kind of like that. Wow, I can't believe this. I'm 70 years old or whatever she was at that time. And she goes, there's going to be something that my stories are kept. Other people are going to hear them. She goes, I really just thought when I was growing up, everybody grew up like this. And then as I told my stories, people go, no, this is not how people grew up. People want to hear about this. And
Yeah.
so she was just so thrilled to be able to do this. And especially being over 70 and having this done, she was just like, wow, I thought all my accomplishments were kind of younger in life. And so this was just that culmination to, like Lorna said, have that final thing done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's still available, by the way, still very much in print. It will be forever as far as I'm concerned. So people can get it on Amazon or I think barnesandnoble.com. Everyday Heroes, True Story of a Lighthouse Family. If you look on Amazon, the reviews are almost entirely, 5-star glowing reviews. People love it so much. They just feel it. Even if they didn't correspond with her in any way or know her personally, people feel like they know her after reading the book because it's so much, and her way of telling a story was so personal and unique. I think somebody said it made them feel like they were sitting on the porch with her, maybe with a cup of tea, and she's telling these stories. That's how it made people feel. So
My office manager where I work at, I told her about Mom and about Grandpa and everything like that. Gave her the name of the book, and she came back a couple of weeks later. She said, I ordered the book and I read it, and I got one for my mom. And when you quit working for us, my mom's got a place up on Cape Cod. You're going to get to go visit. And I was like, oh, really? Okay.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, the people that read it really do love the book.
Yeah. Well, when I went to Cuttyhunk, I want to talk about the memorial service that happened last July. In the Cuttyhunk Historical Society, they have it there in their shop.
Yeah.
It's nice. Yeah. So speaking of that, Lorna, you said that was your first time on the island, right? July of last year, there was a
Yes.
memorial.
Yes.
I don't know if we call it a service. It was a memorial gathering, but
celebration.
Yeah, celebration's a good word for it. So I was, again, thank you both for inviting me to that. I felt very happy to be there that day. Very glad I was able to be there. Only my second time on the island, as I said. So I don't know if you have any more thoughts about what that day was like.
It for me was, it made things a lot. It made things real. It made all the stories that Mom told me over the years really real. I almost didn't want to go. My sister had to convince me because I wasn't sure what to expect. And we had gone through because Mom died so suddenly, we had gone through me personally, I'd gone through kind of an emotional roller coaster about it. And, there's still things that we're all dealing with, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. And I'm glad Gloria convinced me to go. The people were just so warm and welcoming. Cousins that I had never met, didn't know, just reached out. People that I didn't know reached out. And it's made me realize that I do have a connection there.
Yeah.
Going out to the Lighthouse Ring, and of course, the ride out to the Lighthouse Ring scared the tar out of me. That road is something. Yeah. But actually touching it and then see the oil house I've always seen pictures of the oil house. I've always seen pictures of the Gosnell Monument, but to go out there and, really be up close and touch it and making it tangible. It just, I don't know. It gave me such a connection that I didn't think I would feel or experience. Yeah. Seeing where my grandfather was buried at it made a lot of things real. I don't really have a good way of describing the way I felt that day, but I just know that I feel like I got to touch part of my heritage, and a lot of people don't get to do that. And I'm really, really grateful that I had that opportunity. and it won't be my last visit to Cuttyhunk.
Yeah.
So, now I got to go out there, but next time I got to make sure I got a fishing pole because I have got to go fish. I have got to go fish. Be the last part of me connecting even with Grandpa, because I think that's where I get my fishing gene from, because I love to fish.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely in your genes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it was a beautiful day, and it was a beautiful moment. And I couldn't get over the people that were there and the kindness and just the resiliency of the people that live there. That's a lot of toughness and a lot of just special people.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I loved going back, and I had a different viewpoint than Lorna because I'd been there before, and with you, Jeremy, the time you've gone and the time both times you've gone, I've been there, and those were the only times I've been there. But the first time we were there, we stayed with Oriole, and so we had quite a few days there, and Mom got to show me all the things that were her connection. This is where she went to school. This is where this is. We had gone in that church, and she had told me, how special the church was. And she'd showed me all the mosaics and, just a lot of things. So with it not being my first time, all those kind of memories came back about how special each one of these little places were to Mom. And I knew that Mom had a plot in the cemetery, but I didn't know exactly where it was. And I'd been there before, and seeing Grandpa's grave and some of the other family members that are there. But her cousin had bought her that plot years and years ago, and he had bought it for her. So I knew that was her cousin who had done that, and so I knew she had a place, and she always wanted to come back and be buried there. And, just having the celebration in the church and then walking down to the graveyard, it was very special. And, you can't see the pictures on here, but when we went to the graveyard, in one of Mom's journals, I had read that she wanted to make sure that her celebration was not shabby. So I brought some of these little confetti sticks, and everybody hugged Mom's urn before we placed her in it. And then we, took off these confetti sticks, and we just made a celebration of it. Yeah. So I wanted her not to have that shabby funeral. And so we made it a celebration. And then after the celebration, we were able to go out to the lighthouse, and Mom wanted some of her ashes scattered out there. And so we did that in the ring of the lighthouse. And like Lorna said, she got to see the ruins and the oil house and the monument and everything. And it just, leaving just a part of Mom there, that's where, her heart was. And so it was just that final ending. And, it was done about 6 months or so after she had passed. And so even there was, we still had some high emotions, but they weren't as high as, right away when she passed. So we were really glad that we were able to go. And I'm so glad my sister was able to come with me, and my husband, and we had all the family and friends there. And, it wasn't a large ceremony, but it was a very good ceremony, and just a way to have that send off.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for inviting me. And yeah, it was beautiful. And it was a lot of it was also fun, as you were saying, with the confetti things and all that at the cemetery. And that's how she would have wanted it, is for people to have fun, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
No, it was really nice. We're getting near the end here. I just want to read, I have two quotes I want to read, okay? One is from near the end of the book, Everyday Heroes. This is what Seamond said. Quote, "I firmly believe there is a God who looks over the waters and the people who venture there. May our remaining lighthouses shine for many years so that people can realize the lighthouses are there to give people not only a beacon of safety and direction, but also a symbol reminding us that there is good in the world and hope for all," unquote. If either of you would like to comment on that before I read one more quote.
I think that pretty much says it. Pretty much says the way she thought. I don't think Mom's had some periods of time in her life when she was down. But one thing I will say is she never gave up hope. And I think that, she always talked about us being survivors. And I think that her faith had a lot to do with that she always felt like, well, it's bad now, but it's not going to be bad forever.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And Yeah, the lighthouses symbolize that, all that for her
Yep.
too. Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. Okay, one more quote I want to read, and this is from her obituary, okay? Quote, "And so Seamond crossed the bar. The bad days were sure bad enough, but since there were so many good days, like 99.9% of the time, what the heck? She had a good life for sure, and I should know, as I, Seamond Roberts, wrote all this myself.
Yeah.
Goodbye to all my family and friends. Thank you for listening to me and for being so dear to me. I hope to see each of you in our next life's further adventures," unquote. Wow.
Mom believed in being prepared, and she would update things periodically, her will, obituary, things like that. And so it was there on her computer, and I knew that because she has been prepared and told me where paperwork and things were. So when I saw it, I read it to Lorna and I said, "Oh my gosh, should I put it in this way?" She goes, "Absolutely," because that's
Uh-huh.
Mom. And so,
I'm
so
glad you did. It's perfect. It's perfect.
so
Okay. I have one more question for both of you for bonus points, okay? And this I know is going to be difficult to put it in a few words, but if you're talking to somebody who didn't know your mom, doesn't know a lot about her, how would you describe her in a few sentences? Okay. Who wants to go first?
Gloria, you go. I don't think you can describe Mom in a few sentences. I don't think you
I
can.
If you
this is
can't, you
the
can't.
Yeah.
this is the elevator pitch, right, on Mom. Um, you know what? Mom herself has been a very resilient person, and I do tell a lot of people that, like I said earlier, she didn't get to go on with formal education, but the education she had was very dear to her. And sharing what she could, learning what she could, and sharing it with others was always very important. And Mom also loved to play the piano. And when Lorna and I were little, Mom told us a story that she wanted to play the piano. She got lessons when she was on Martha's Vineyard. She only took like 2 or 3 lessons, and she came back home and told her parents, "I don't need lessons. I figured out how to do this." And Mom would just be able to hear like the song played in church. She'd be able to come back and play the song. And
Wow.
so when we were little, Lorna and I, Mom used to check out music from the library, and it would be wailing songs because she wanted us to know about that heritage. So we had different songs growing up. But I do tell people, she's gone through a lot of hard times. She's always been resilient, and she taught us how to be resilient. And with all her unique history, she's wanted to share with others. She's always been willing to help others because she has realized that there's good in the world, there's bad in the world, but she has always believed there's been more good out there in people, put her trust in people, and helps where she can. And that's what I really take away from Mom so much, is that resiliency. And like Lorna said again, things may not be so bad right now. They're not going to be bad forever, or they are bad right now, but they won't be forever. And you just kind of keep that hope going. And that's what I saw on Mom, is that resiliency, that hope, and that belief that there's a lot of good people out there.
Yeah. Mom never lost her faith that people could be decent. She believed in decency. She believed in kindness, and she also didn't believe in quitting. You could fail, but you weren't allowed to quit. So I think that got her through a lot of tough times, even some ones that we'll never ever talk about for her. But she never quit. Even after her last husband died, she never quit. The woman wanted to live to be 100 years old, and she was 82 and still working.
Yeah.
So she's just kind of an inspiration where that goes, that you just don't give up. Nobody should just give up. And if you feel like you're going to give up, there's somebody around that will not let you give up. And that was Mom.
Well, I think that comes out in the book too. So just refer people to that again. But knowing your mom certainly made my life more special for knowing her. And I can't say enough about how glad I am that, that she trusted me to share her stories with me and eventually to put them into the book. It was just a great experience. She was a great storyteller. And I think that rubbed off on both of you. You're both good storytellers too. So it runs in the family. And I think her mother, loved writing those letters and everything. So there's a certain thread there. But anyway, so this is all so special. And I appreciate you spending this time today talking about her. Maybe we can do a part 2 sometime, because I feel like there's no end to the stories.
Yes.
But anyway, thank you so much. And it's great talking with you both again.
You're welcome. And thank you, Jeremy, for asking us to do this.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
My second ever visit to Cuttyhunk was last year in July for a memorial gathering at the little church on the island, and everyone there shared their memories of Seamond. Some just said a little, and some said a lot, but all the stories highlighted a life that was lived fully. It was a life that had some struggles and setbacks, but Seamond never lost hope, as Lorna said in the interview. Seamond loved people, and they loved her back. I think that was naturally who Seamond was, but I also think being a daughter of a lighthouse keeper taught her resilience and a sense of purpose. Here's a line from the last part of her book, Everyday Heroes. Quote, "Every day I breathe a special thanks to God that I was lucky enough to be a child of the lighthouses." Unquote. Be sure to check out uslhs.org to read about all the things the U.S. Lighthouse Society does, including tours, preservation grants, and so much more. Donations and memberships support this podcast. We will be back next week with an interview about Beavertail Light in Rhode Island. Until then, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and keep a good light.